procession of the official party and remain standing for the national anthem and territorial acknowledgement.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today, and please remain standing as Chief Russell Chips of the Shianu Nation, Dr. Elder Shirley Alphonse from the Souk First Nation, and John Horgan's Honorary Elder, and Elder Rick Peter from Shianu Nation extend a welcome to territory long cared for by their people.
Welcome to the traditional territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt, the Kwanghan-speaking people, and the shared territories of Beecher Bay and Souk. It's an honor to stand here with my friend John from Langford. I'm going to miss him, and it warms my heart that everybody is standing here, all these people around, here to express joy, share love, share hope. Something that he shared with me all the time was hope, and there's just not enough of that going around. And to see you here today fills my heart with joy. And I know we always, as political leaders, get the forefront of things. We always forget that we have beautiful people standing behind us. Ellie, I'm so sad and I'm so sorry. I love you, I love your family, and if there's anything I can do, our community can do, we're willing to give back. We love you. I'm just going to introduce Rick Peters. Just introduce us.
Siam Chocho, Siam Slaniness White Coat, Heis Concept, Siam Heis Concept, News Solution Sip, Siam. Brothers and sisters, welcoming each and every one of you here to honor a beautiful brother, husband, friend. Our song that we will be singing for you as our prayer song. This song goes out to our loved one, the family, to each and every one of you and all of our family and friends that are in hurt, sorrow, and dealing with a lot of this. So this is for all of you, family here especially, and for our brother to have a safe journey on his trip. Heichka, Klako, Kayla Gosla, Marcy. Our brother, hey, merci, Sheshe, Doje, Aligato, merci beaucoup, Dankevel, Petins, Hawa, Gracias, Megwet, Shalamat, Dankevel. Thank you very much.
You may be seated. Thank you, Chief and Elders, for the welcome and the song. My name is Reverend Keith Howard, and over 30 years ago, John and the Horgan clan attended the congregation I served in Colwood. So it is my privilege to welcome each of you and to guide us through this event this afternoon, which is really a combination of a wake, a celebration, and a funeral. But throughout, we gather today to celebrate the life of John Horgan, husband of Ellie, father to Nate and Evan, father-in-law to Daisy and Veronica, brother, son, son-in-law, friend to many of us, Shamrock fan, Grizzlies fan, Canucks fan, longtime advocate for the people of the Western communities of Victoria, Monty Python and Star Trek devotee, former Premier of British Columbia, and the Canadian ambassador to Germany. Ellie tells the story of when they first landed in Germany to take up the position of ambassador. A woman was standing with a sign saying, H.E. Horgan, at the exit to the stairway. John turned to Ellie and said, "Isn't it amazing that there would be another Horgan on this plane?" Not to be denied the possibility of using his superpower to make a connection, he approached the woman and said, "I'm not H.E. Horgan, but I am J.J. Horgan." To which she replied, "You are the one, Your Excellency." The addition of His Excellency to his normal designation, John from Langford, probably had the same whiplash effect as if he was named Sexiest Man of the Year. Although John might have quipped about time. But we gather to celebrate. But our celebrations are seasoned with tears, for we already miss him. His humor, humility, and leadership. Grief accompanies every loss and can be powerful and sneaky. So we do not gather to solve our grief or to mask it with the false hope that we will get over it and return to normal. We gather because in the process of learning how to carry our grief, we know that the accompaniment of others, their memories and their stories, keeps us upright as we stumble through the valley of the shadow. Grieving someone or something we care about, a son, a daughter, a wife, husband, friend, even a vision, can shake what we assume to be reality. We wonder what is worth giving our lives and our energy to, what or who provides meaning. Those are sacred questions. So we acknowledge this as also a holy time, for our celebrations, memories, and tears are saturated with the presence of what we in the Christian tradition and many other faith traditions name as God. When, like John, we know we near the end of this version of life, some words and music provide the soundtrack, that can keep us going during those final steps. And that soundtrack can range from Monty Python, Doug and the Slugs, to old gospel classics. The music we experience today, both within this service and following, is from John's final playlist. So welcome to this complicated, wonderful, and sacred time. Please stand as you are able or so inclined to sing a couple verses of that old gospel hymn with Al, Carl, and Nate.
when I am awesome wonder, consider all the world thy hands have made. I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When through the woods and forest glades I wander and hear the birds sing sweetly in the trees. When I look down from lofty mountain grandeur and see the brook and feel the gentle breeze. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, yeah, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art, how great thou art, how great thou
Thank you, guys. Wonderful. You may be seated. The bulk of the life of John, a.k.a. H.E. Horgan, was given to public service at a variety of levels. I would like now to invite Her Honor, the Honorable Janet Austin, Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia, to speak.
Thank you very much. Elders and chiefs, Ellie and the whole Horgan family, Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Eby, Governor Inslee, premiers from other jurisdictions, so many distinguished guests, I couldn't possibly name you all, but we are all friends here today. I start, as always, by acknowledging the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Chianu First Nations upon whose traditional territory we gather today, and thank them for sharing these lands in peace and friendship. Aitzquaichel Steracha Ikonis Quinangahela, which is good day, friends. It's good to be among you today, and I do mean that so very sincerely. I am so deeply honored to share a few brief reflections about former Premier John Horgan. As we've heard, John from Langford, as he wished to be known. He was a fine man who loved this province and everyone in it. I thoroughly enjoyed the time that I spent with him. I loved his quickness, his corny but charming sense of humor, and the litany of groan-worthy dad jokes that he showered upon the entire population of British Columbia. I miss seeing him at Government House events. He was always the last to leave. I used to tease him by giving him my keys and saying, "Okay, John, when you're ready to go, you lock up, I'm going to bed." But mostly, I loved his kindness and the good intention he brought to his work and to his interactions with everyone. Despite his many contributions and accomplishments, he remained remarkably without ego. For him, it was not about needing to be right, but about getting the right decision. John understood that a vigorous exchange of different thoughts and perspectives is essential for a democracy to thrive, thus enabling people who disagree to share power. He believed in our ability to work together, despite all that would divide us. And he believed in our democracy, this sometimes chaotic, often raucous, perfectly imperfect system that, despite its flaws, has ensured that we are governed in peace, that our human rights are protected, and that our institutions function objectively and evolve in a transparent fashion. There is a saying that the best person to give power to is the person who does not seek it. That was John. He could be trusted with power because he would use it wisely and for all the right reasons. In a world where public trust is hard won and easily lost, John was an exemplar of authentic leadership. He dedicated his life and his heart to the people of British Columbia, and he earned the respect and affection of allies and opponents alike. A rare feat that speaks to the depth of his character and to his good intent. Public service, as you know, isn't the glamorous path that some people think it is. It's grueling, often thankless, and it demands one's whole self. And John gave us his all. We are poorer for his loss, but so much richer for having known him. And for surely he will live long and prosper in our memories of him and in his many gifts to British Columbia. Wasn't he marvelous? Haichka Siem.
Thank you, Your Honor. As we well know, the lives of us as individuals and as a province are intertwined with the direction of our country. I would now like to invite the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to offer a few remarks. Prime Minister.
Bonjour, good afternoon. We all gather here today by the thousands because there's so much to admire about John as a dad, husband, leader, and friend. Although part of me still insists he's not actually gone, he's just pining for the fjords. Combining progressive values, pragmatism, wisdom, and compassion, he never shied away from challenges, but above all, he had an extraordinary sense of humor, something which was evident from our very first meeting in Ottawa after he became Premier. There's a story he loved to tell about that day, and I know some of you may have heard it once or twice. As John told it and retold it and retold it, he was a bit nervous. I couldn't see it, but it became clearer once we started the joint news conference. With the media assembled in front of us, he was asked a slightly uncomfortable question about a certain piece of pipeline infrastructure, which was a topic of some disagreement between the two of us. Well, starting his answer, he raised his hand, about to get into an animated response, and knocked over his glass of water, spilling it over the lectern and onto the floor. Without missing a beat, John looked up and deadpanned, "Spills can happen anywhere." Of course, not to be outdone, I said, no, people will clean that up, don't worry. And he turns to me with a smile and says something like, that is a federal area of responsibility. I gave up. That was John. Quick-witted, brilliant, but unflinching in his values and beliefs. Une des choses qui faisait de John un homme aussi exceptionnel, c'était sa capacité de rassembler les gens, à les unir et faire en sorte qu'on travaille ensemble pour le bien de tous. Et la pandémie a été un des exemples les plus marquants de ça. During the pandemic, John stepped up as chair of the Council of Federation to save lives. But more than that, he recognized the cracks in our healthcare systems that the pandemic exposed. And he spearheaded an effort to land a new deal between the federal government and provinces over healthcare funding. Now, as decades of federal provincial history has shown, that's no small thing. But John was determined in the way that only he can be. So one brisk late autumn evening in Victoria, the two of us together sat down in a lounge in the legislature, ordered what would prove to be too many pizzas and too few beers, and we talked as friends and partners about the future. I felt John's vision and passion for a stronger, healthier Canada all through that evening. And after a long night, we got a deal done. Oh, it would take months for the officials and ministers to put to paper the $200 billion for family doctors, for mental health support, for reduced backlogs, for better data. But it was John that made it happen that night. That was one of his last acts as Premier. And I can't think of a better legacy for all Canadians than that. Quand il a remis sa démission en tant que Premier ministre, après avoir vu sa capacité à être polyvalent, pragmatique, mais aussi combatif et dévoué à ses principes, lui confier le rôle de son Excellence l'ambassadeur auprès de l'un de nos meilleurs alliés, l'Allemagne, était une décision très facile. John lived an accomplished life. He was Chief of Staff Horgan. He was Premier Horgan. He was His Excellency Ambassador Horgan. But to people lucky enough to have known him, to the people of British Columbia who greatly admired him and who he so clearly loved back, he will always be John from Langford. John, it was an incredible joy and privilege to have worked alongside you, but more than anything, it was an honor to call you my friend. Merci, mon ami.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Ellie describes the first 5 months of their time in Germany as incredible. The last 5, not so much. While our ambassador in Germany, His Excellency's close colleague, was Evelyn Coulombe, Charge d'Affaires, Embassy of Canada in Germany, who helped make the time delightful and then bearable. Evelyn has come on a quick turnaround of 24-hour flight to be with us today. So welcome, Evelyn.
Ladies and gentlemen, meine Damen und Herren, chers amis du Canada, This is how John would start all of his speech in Germany. So in his honor, I'm doing the same today. So my name is Evelyn Coulombe. I'm the Deputy Ambassador at the Canadian Embassy in Germany. And I was basically John's second in command. I feel so grateful and lucky to have met John and Ellie. And I came all this way from Berlin on a personal trip because I wanted to honor Ambassador John Horgan, or His Excellency Horgan, unser Botschafter, like we'll say in German, and hug the love of his life, Ellie, and pass on my condolences to his sons and their spouses. I also wanted to represent all of the staff at our Embassy of Canada in Berlin and at our consulates in Munich and Düsseldorf, and many of us are actually with us today watching online. And John had a way about him that left a positive and lasting impression on everyone he met. And we did a celebration of life at the Embassy of Canada, and everyone had almost always funny story, a selfie, a stone, or another memory of John. And he got to know all of our staff individually and established special connections with them. He knew also where all of Canadian staff was from, and that came in handy when the Canucks beat the Oilers or the Flames. He would tease the staff from Edmonton or Calgary or Toronto when the Canucks beat the Leafs. We opened a condolence book at the embassy, and we were flooded with visitors because so many ambassadors and other contacts he had met along the way came to sign the book. And believe me, it has a lot of stories. I have many stories myself about when he called himself the affable one, and I was the competent one. And inevitably, somebody in the room would say, but wait a minute, Evelyn's affable. And somebody else would say, well, Ambassador, you're also very competent. So it was our shtick. As ambassador, he often has functions at night, so we kept his schedule light in the late afternoon so he could return home, change, and relax before his evening functions, often with dear Ellie. And when he was leaving to go to the official residence, he would stick his head in my office and say, work harder, even if I was working flat out. He had a lot of humor. He also had quite an impact on the Germany-Canada relations, although he was ambassador for a relatively short time. He created a buzz in Germany. We obtained all of the meetings we requested. He connected so well with everyone, politicians, CEOs, students, artists, researchers, anyone and everyone. We were able to advance our priorities, whether it was energy, trade, network building, diversity, inclusion, and the rest. He was a people's person, and diplomacy is all about relationships and building bridges. He was a great ambassador, a great public speaker, a great representative of Canada, and he displayed a perfect balance of strengths and vulnerability that made him a true and authentic leader. So I brought with me the flag that was flown at the embassy when he was ambassador, and then we'll give it to Ellie. And it is more of a military tradition, but when our defense attaché, it's called a colonel, an ambassador would call him colonel, had the idea. I thought it was a great idea. So John never denied he was a homer, and he missed BC very much, and I know BC loved him back. He missed the smell of the ocean, and he missed the mountains. For anyone who has not yet been to Berlin, Berlin is very flat, and there's not a mountain or an ocean to be seen as far as the eye can see. It is so nice for me to be back in BC after having spent wonderful years in BC. I even met my husband here. It is a very special place. I could speak about John for a long time, but I wanted to conclude by saying I miss John very much. I'm missing his bigger-than-life personality and his authenticity, his energy and his sense of humor, his kindness and his cheerfulness, his optimism and his humility. And I could go on, but I will continue to be inspired by him, and he will continue to be by my side as I pursue the path we started together to advance Canada's interests in Germany. And I can hear him say to me, get back to work with his big and deep voice. Rest in peace, my friend. Thank you. Merci. Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Evelyn, for making the trip and for those comments. I would like now to invite the Honourable David Eby, Premier of British Columbia, to come forward on behalf of the province. In fact, there you are.
John and I didn't talk a lot about spiritual stuff, but I have to say a gathering of thousands of the political elite of British Columbia in a lacrosse arena on a Sunday would be pretty close to his definition of heaven. I was thinking about, I think about this a lot. You know, John was such a successful premier. The transformative change around the relationship of the province with Indigenous people through the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People Act, championed, passed through the legislature in a minority parliament, getting the big money out of politics, changing a lot of the ways decisions were made in our province, just that one change. Smaller changes that were life-altering for British Columbians, waiving tuition for kids in care so that they were able to go to college or university and get skills and build a life. I met a young woman named Maddie. Her life was transformed by that one decision. She's starting a business, she's got a young family, incredible. How do you do it? And I tell you, as a politician, and I'm sure it's the question a lot of us politicians who are here ask is, man, he left politics more popular than when he entered. How do you do that? There's some lessons for some of us. I hear you, Justin. So I was thinking about it, like, what is it? How do you do it? John was in politics for a long time. I'm like a new guy, I only worked with him for a decade. A lot of you here worked with him for way longer. When I first met John, and Michelle and I and a bunch of you in this room probably helped strong-arm him into becoming the leader of the opposition. You know, John, like, he had to be talked into it. He was hard to get, and he was hard to keep. I remember a moment, and it was a particularly dark moment, you know, the miracle in Alberta had just happened. You know, some of our team had left to go join Team Alberta at DP, and I was giving John a hard time about something. I'm sure it felt very important at the time. And he looked at me, it was just us in the office, he looked me straight in the eye and he said, Eby, if you want, I'll use family-friendly language. He said, if you want this job, then I'll leave the keys right on this desk and you can knock yourself out. I'll be the happiest guy in town. John, no thank you. Whatever you want, man. It changed, you know, but that freedom that he had, and like, if this job isn't feeling good for me, if I don't feel like I'm making change for people, if this isn't, you know, I got other things to do. I got Ellie, I got Nate, I got Evan, I got things going on at home. I want to tumble some rocks. I got things to do. And so I'm going to have a good time while I'm here. I'm going to do some stuff. And I think that freedom helped him be really effective. He was loyal. Man, if you were on Team Horgan, you knew it. There's a bunch of people in this room, you know, who felt that. If you felt like you were on John's team, he'd have your back no matter what. I remember he tasked me with the file. I wasn't thrilled to get it, but he gave me a lot of files I was thrilled to get, but the referendum on proportional representation, I would say, was not my dream gig. John asked, absolutely, John, I will serve. And so I put a lot of thought into it. I was a rookie politician. I was fairly convinced that the majority of British Columbians spent a lot of time thinking about electoral systems and had wanted to spend time coming up to speed on what the options were. I was mistaken. But he said, like, go design the question, then come back, and then we'll keep that separate and all this. So we sat down in front of the desk with him, and I presented the question that I come up with to him. It was 2 parts. The second part was 3 different electoral systems, of which he had heard of one. And he looked at me, and his face twitched a little bit. And he said, okay. And that was all he said. He was willing to let you make a mistake. He was willing to give you all the rope that you wanted. And I think that's how he was a really effective leader too, man. Like, I know that all of the former MLAs that got to work with him, you got to run your files. And sometimes it worked out great, and then sometimes you had the second worst referendum in the history of British Columbia. Just the third piece was, I talk about being on John's team. I mean, there were groups that you knew weren't on John's team, the Turkeys, the Gnomes in Zurich, those are bond rating agencies. And then there was the columnists. I hope that's not offensive to anybody here. But John's tent was always open. His team was always, these folks were just mistaken, right? They weren't actually bad people. They were just mistaken. And one of the things that John said to us over and over in caucus was, the majority of province is New Democrat, they just don't know it yet. Go out there, talk to people you haven't talked to before. One of the biggest mistakes that I thought John made that turned out to be one of his smartest decisions was he made the call. We had just been elected in the minority parliament. We got all these members of I know there are members of the public service here. And again, I don't mean any disrespect by this. Looking at these deputy ministers who had sat down with the BC Liberals side by side through all these estimates processes we went through and everything, and now they're supposed to work with us. And I was like, John, you gotta fire these people. What's wrong with you? They're BC Liberal people. And John said, no, we're not firing these people. He knew that we would have been behind the 8 ball if we had to build up a whole new team, and he knew that the public service had a key role, and he had confidence in them. They were part of his team. They were always welcome. And I'm looking at the front row here. I see Scott Moe, Conservative Premier from Saskatchewan, who made the journey here. He's going to be flying on a red-eye back to the Council of Federation. A significant effort to be here, Scott. It's so good to see you and your family here. When he was with the premiers at the Council of Federation, they were on John's team. It didn't matter that they were from another party. Everyone was working together for a purpose. And he always believed, and I'm sure British Columbians felt it because they gave it back to him in the 2020 election result. He always believed in people. He didn't believe in parties, and in a time of strong politicized partisanship around the world, John was always welcoming. He was always willing to work with people, and he was always prepared to create space for people who made mistakes. Thank God for me. And so I want to say, Ellie, Nate, Evan, thank you so much for sharing your dad with us. I know what it costs a family to have somebody at this level of politics and for that long. And I want to thank you for sharing John with us. And on behalf of all of my colleagues and the people of British Columbia, I want to thank you for sending and sharing such an amazing man with us. John was one of a kind. He was a remarkable man. He was a mentor and a coach to so many of us here. And the province, the legacy that he leaves behind will be felt for many, many generations to come. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Each of us really only knows a part of another. We peek through the knothole at a life constructed. And many fine things were written and spoken about John following his death. And I encourage you to Google those, if only to deepen the palette of your memory. Friends and families have scrapbooks of personal memories. I spoke with John and Ellie the afternoon before John's death. And among other things, we talked of family and the fine young men his sons had become. Nate and Evan are the top two. Actually, the only two fine young sons. Nate?
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nate. I am John's, well, objectively older son. I was colloquially referred to as the good son, just a bit of an inside joke. And I was thinking of making some dad joke about, the razor burn I've got, but I figured better to just shave a little time off my my allotted segment. All right, I am not going to mention anyone by name, but I just want to say thank you to everyone who's come out and said kind words about Dad. It really means more than I can say. So, this is a tune I wrote for my dad. When I was born, your first baby, you were afraid a father to be. Mother Serene said to you, take my hand, we'll make it through. Mountains rise, mountains fall, time goes by, sun makes its way across the sky. When I was a child, you played with me. We looked for treasures from chestnut trees. Day became night, we walked through the park. You said, take my hand, don't fear the dark. It's okay, there's only 8 more verses. I think I'll be fine. It's fine. Okay, I'll see if I can do a couple more verses though. As a young man, I moved away. I didn't see you every day. When I got stuck, I called on the phone. You said, son, you're not alone. This is a lot easier when it was just me in the room. Mountains rise, mountains fall, time goes by. The moon makes its way across the sky. People come, people go, stone becomes sand. Take some strength, holding my hand. Just zoom in so you can get the snot. Now you're gone, what am I gonna do? All I have ever done was to impress you. every time I write a new song. I'll see your hand make the salute to prosper and live long. Mountains rise, mountains fall, time goes by. The sun makes its way across the sky. People come, people go, bones become ash. All of our days pass in a flash. Kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall, time becomes now. Look at the sun in the sky. People come, people go, stone becomes sand. I miss you so much. I miss you so much. I miss you so much. Now you're in God's hand. I miss you so much. I miss you so much. Now you're in God's hand. Thank you very much. I miss you, Dad.
Thanks, Nate. By the way, as an unsolicited plug, Nate is pursuing a musical career in the UK under the name Nate Silas. Check that YouTube channel. Evan, of course, is the other son, and not the spare son, but the other son. And he and his wife also are entering a new chapter, but the news is under wraps until 9 months come.
Cat's out of the bag. Oh, is it me?
It's
Okay.
you.
Sorry. I don't know. Thanks, Ma. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. Welcome to my song on the spoons. No, I'm kidding. I have no musical ability. Why do melons get so frustrated at weddings? Because they can't elope. Yeah, I thought Dad would have liked that one. I think he told it at my wedding. I've been told by our good friend Eric, I don't know where he is out here, but he said, as the only blood relative of John who's speaking today, that there are no bounds or constraints on how long I can talk for. I can ramble for as long as I want. A Horgan with a microphone and a captive audience and no time limit is the most dangerous thing in the world. So for the benefit of everyone in attendance today and as a matter of self-preservation, I'm going to try and keep this short and concise as possible. I'd like to start by just saying a couple quick thank yous on behalf of the Horgan family, my mom Ellie, my brother Nate, sister-in-law Daisy, and my beautiful wife Veronica. We'd like to thank all the staff at the Royal Jubilee Hospital here in Victoria, as well as the Charité University Hospital in Berlin. The last few months of Dad's life weren't easy, but every medical professional we met along the way, the doctors, nurses, care aides, administrators, they all treated him with the utmost professionalism, compassion, and dignity. They did the best to give him the care that he deserved and did everything they could to prolong his life. And when that turned out to not be possible anymore, they did everything they could to make him comfortable. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you to all the medical staff. To our political dignitaries, elected officials, elders, community representatives, and other distinguished guests, thank you for being here today, for taking the time and traveling so far to be here. It means a lot to us. To our family, our friends, neighbors, and everyone else who has just showered us with love and support over the last few weeks and months, you know, your kindness and generosity and love has meant the world to us. There have been days when we felt like we were drowning in a sea of grief and we might never see the shore again. But your love and kindness was the lifeline we needed to bring us back. The unlimited messages, phone calls, texts, letters, care packages, lasagnas, groceries, all that was immense and powerful, and I don't think we can ever properly express our gratitude, so thank you. And then lastly, to Eric and Shannon, Amber, and everyone else who worked tirelessly around the clock and bent over backwards to put today together, thank you for everything you did. This is terrifying and immense. There's far more of you than I ever would have thought. In his final weeks, when he thought what a memorial service for him might look like, Dad thought maybe 80 to 100 people might want to come. We could find a small chapel somewhere. It shouldn't be too hard to do. But I don't think that he ever imagined anything like this. I don't think he or us really ever truly understood the scope and reach of his influence. So thank you all for being here, for making today possible. This is very humbling. And so here we are, to remember the life of John Horgan. As Prime Minister Trudeau said, he was known by many things: His Excellency, Premier Horgan, John from Langford, Coach Horgan, Jump Shot Johnny. I don't think I ever actually heard anyone call him that, but I think it was a nickname he was workshopping on me one day, and it flopped. But if there's any members of the 1983 Trent University varsity basketball team here, let me know if that one was real. But I don't think so. And while he was any number of things to any number of people, to Nate and I, he was never anything more than just Dad. And he was a good dad. He was the kind of dad who was at every hockey game, at every band concert. He was the kind of dad who would come home from a long day of work, exhausted, and get on his hands and knees and play mini hockey with me for hours because I couldn't stop bouncing around. He was the kind of dad that takes you camping in the summers, has a snowball fight with you in the winters, the kind who will take you swimming at soup potholes and make sure you stop for ice cream on the way home every time. He encouraged us to pursue our passions. He took interest in the things we were interested in so he could interact with us and support us. He taught us to try new things, and as Premier Eby alluded to, he told us not to be afraid to make mistakes or to fail, because he thought that's where you learn the most, and he supported us in that. He taught us about integrity, humility, honesty. He taught us that the most important lesson in life is to always try your level best. The outcome never really matters as much as the input. Do your best, forget the rest. The beauty of my dad was that he didn't really care for pomp or circumstance. You know, whatever job title he had, whatever station he rose to, and whatever perceived prestige came along with it, that didn't make a lick of difference to him. He was always the same guy. He was just Dad, John from Langford. And I think that's probably why most people resonated with him. You know, he was exactly who you wanted him to be. He was down to earth. He was the kind of person you want to go have a beer, grab a cup of coffee with. He was funny. He had an impish quality and a wicked sense of humor. He loved to make people laugh or play the class clown if he had to. And he was nerdy. Oh, God. He was so nerdy. He loved Star Trek. I don't think there's an episode of any Star Trek series in this galaxy or any other that he hadn't seen before. He loves twice, yeah. He loved Star Wars. He loved Doctor Who. He loved Lord of the Rings. He loved games. He loved playing Settlers of Catan, cribbage, backgammon. He loved doing jigsaw puzzles and spreading them out over the dining room table and mulling about them for days. But as a lot of you know, and I think it's been alluded to, he loved polishing rocks. And he loved sharing them with the people that meant something to him. My mom and I often joke that he was like a penguin. There you go, I see a couple people holding their rocks up. Way to go. He was like a penguin, and if you were someone special to him, he would give you one of his favorite rocks, and he would walk around pebbling the people that meant something to him. You know, I have 34 years of wonderful, happy memories with my dad. And I hope you'll all forgive me, but I won't be sharing any of them with you today. I shared my dad publicly with the people of BC for 19 years, and it was my great honor to do so. I know how proud it made him to serve the province he loved and try and help all the people he could. But my favorite stories, the best ones that always make me smile, I'm gonna keep those for myself and for our family so that on the dark days, we can tell them to each other and try and find some light. I had 34 happy years with my dad, but I thought I'd get 34 more. This grief is thirsty work. In what unknowingly turned out to be his final day, I was the last person to be with him in the hospital. And he and I just sat there chatting for hours, as we so often did 1,000 times before. We talked into the night about all manner of things. We talked about how the Canucks were doing, and if Petey could just find his scoring touch again, they'd be unstoppable. Quinn Hughes is the future. We talked about how he was still upset with the ending of Game of Thrones. We talked about some heavier things. We talked about what advice he might have for me as an expecting father, what his greatest triumphs and regrets were in life. And I asked him, what would he want me to say about him if today ever came? And he said, just tell everyone I did my level best. I love my dad very much, and the world feels emptier without him in it. I constantly find myself feeling homesick for a place that no map can ever guide me back to. So I'd like to end on an analogy I heard the other day that I think is quite fitting, and hopefully some of you will agree. It says, grief is like a stone that you carry with you in your pocket. It's always there, and you will always feel its weight. At first, the stone is jagged and sharp. Its edges stab and scrape at you constantly. But as time goes on, you get stronger and stronger. As you continue to carry it with you, the edges of the stone get worn down. They're no longer as sharp. Over time, it becomes rounded, smooth, polished. So it's no longer a sharp stabbing pain, but simply just a dull weight that you carry with you. As you get stronger, it's not the stone ever goes away, it's that you become more familiar with it, and it gets lighter. I saw a few other people holding up their stones. This is a stone from Dad that he polished for me. Nate has the exact same one, cut from the same rock. I carry this stone with me every day, and I will forever feel its weight. His name was John from Langford. He always did his level best. We are proud of him. We love him, and he'll never be forgotten. Thank you.
Thanks, Ev. Your dad would be proud. As you have gathered, John called many people friends as well as colleagues. Carol James, former Deputy Premier and Minister of Finance of British Columbia, boxing protege, longtime friend of John. Carol.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's such an honor for Michael and I to have been asked by John to deliver his eulogy. John gave me a number of tough jobs over the time period we worked together, but I have to say, this is the toughest. Now, some of you may have been expecting a more traditional or formal setting today, but of course, John had something to say about that. It was about a week before, or a week after he'd announced that he was stepping down, and he was busy packing up his office. Protocol dropped by to speak to him, telling him they had a routine question that they had to ask. If something happens to you, John, after you leave office, would you want a formal state funeral? John, without missing a beat, said, "Do I have to be there?" Protocol hesitated for a moment and said, "It is usually expected, Premier." "Well then, no thanks," John said. "Nothing stuffy for me." And so here we are at the Q Arena, one of John's favorite places, just as we should be. John, of course, also gave Michael and I directions for this event. He asked me to touch on John's time in politics, and for Michael to cover his life outside politics. But as you've heard, and as all of us know, it's impossible to separate John from Langford from John the Premier. In fact, it's the very essence of what made John so loved. He was always true to who he was. Now, John will be the first to step up and say that he was no saint. In fact, all of us who knew John knew that Ellie was the real saint, and he would always be the first to agree. They had a partnership and a marriage that was envied by all. John began his journey in politics after obtaining his master's degree in history in Australia. He and Ellie were loving their time in Australia and were planning to stay when visa requirements cut their time short and brought him back to Canada. John quickly found a job in Ottawa, supporting MPs James Manley and Lynn Hunter. And it wasn't long before all of his skills were noticed. And when the NDP won government in 1991, he returned to BC and served in a wide range of areas, including policy, communications, chief of staff, until the party lost in 2001. In the years following the loss, after much complaining about the direction the province was heading, John was told by his friends to quit whining and do something about it. John then re-entered the political scene in the 2005 election, this time as an elected member of the legislature, winning his home riding of Malahat-Wandafuka. And that was the start of our work together as colleagues, teammates, and friends. Now, if John was here, he would actually tell you that he and I met at one of the many parties he attended during high school. Notice I said he attended. No matter how many times I would remind him that I was 2 years older than him, and I wasn't hanging around with the younger kids, 15 was a young kid at that age, he would always keep the story going. He enjoyed the legend that he had seen a wilder side of me that nobody was aware of. Now, during John's time in opposition, he was passionate about his work, and he quickly became a front bench opposition critic. But part of the role of being an opposition member means opposing the government direction, and proposing ideas most often ignored by government was not his favorite part of the job. It left him feeling frustrated and wishing he could do more. John had served in staff roles in government. He'd seen the real difference that could be made for more people on the government side of the legislature. But he managed to deal with that in opposition because he went back to his roots. He focused on serving the people in his riding. Barbecues, visits to schools, Remembrance Day services, trips from Jordan River to Souk Flats to Shirley to Langford showcased his natural ability to connect with people. The NDP's return to opposition in the 2013 election left the party feeling discouraged, but also determined to find a leader to unite us and to get us back to work. It wasn't long before John's name came up, and a group came together to convince John that he should put his name forward. John, of course, during that time period, spent his time trying to convince other people to step forward, encouraging the next generation to take their turn. But the choice was clear. In a show of unanimity, John was chosen leader, and what a choice that was. In 2017, John ended the BC Liberals' 16-year hold on power, forged a confidence and supply agreement with the Greens, and moved into the Premier's role as head of an NDP minority government. And the legacy of Premier John Horgan began. Now, no one was more surprised than John at how much he loved the job. He thrived on the opportunity to make connections all across the province, and he reached out to people everywhere he went. And he went everywhere. Road trips across British Columbia, building connections everywhere he traveled. I had the good fortune and sometimes the challenge of joining him on some of those trips, which often required making unexpected stops when John decided something interesting would catch his eye. One particular trip, we were heading to Williams Lake. And as we were leaving, my husband Al asked John if we were going to make a stop at Surplus Herbie's. Well, that certainly caught John's eye. He loved nothing more than wandering through antique stores, surplus stores filled with things that you would never ever need, but great to browse through. So, of course, we made a stop at Surplus Herbie's. Now, John happily wandered the packed aisles while I waited impatiently, I admit, at the front of the store. But I noticed a shopper peering around the corner. He looked around the corner at me. He'd go down the other aisle. He'd look around the corner at me. Finally, he rushed down towards me, yelling, "I know who you are. Wow, I never thought I'd meet somebody famous in Surplus Herbie's. It's so amazing. You don't have security with you. You're just hanging out at the store. It's really wonderful to meet you." And he headed away. Not a minute later, I heard him a few aisles over, greeting John. "Wow, you're here too. I can't believe it. It's my lucky day. 2 famous people in this store." He then headed to the cashier and loudly told her, "You will not believe it. What are the chances I get to meet the Premier of the province and then the Leader of the Opposition, both in Surplus Herbie's at the same time?" Now, John loved to tell this story as a reminder that none of us as politicians should ever take ourselves seriously. The titles didn't matter. It was the connection with people. It was the work we did for him that mattered. John brought all of his skills to his job: strong leadership, a deep belief in teamwork, problem solving, working through sectors and across the usual political lines, a genuine love of people. And he did all that with staying true to who he was: pragmatic, practical, down to earth, funny, caring, compassionate, deeply cared about justice and fairness, and he was driven to get things done for people. As you've heard, John loved nicknames, and soon Premier Dad, the People's Premier, and John from Langford became his monikers. He was one of the most popular premiers we've ever seen, respected and loved by people across the political spectrum. The outpouring of stories and encounters with John has been overwhelming for everyone. People always felt they knew him personally, whether they had met him or not. And while John was deeply touched by the support he received, it was his accomplishments, the differences that he made for people, that he was most proud of. For John, it wasn't about who he was. It was about what he could get done for the people of British Columbia. Now, there isn't enough time to list all the things John achieved, but even a short list of the highlights make it clear the positive impact that he had. Raising the minimum wage, free tuition for adult basic education, ending MSP premiums, reducing the small business tax rate by 20%, free tuition, as you heard, and supports for former youth in care, bringing healthcare workers back into our public healthcare system, removing bridge tolls, launching Clean BC, getting big money out of politics, making unprecedented capital investments in housing and schools and infrastructure across our province, $1 billion investment to start building a $10 a day quality, affordable childcare system, tackling speculation and money laundering in our housing market, leading us through difficult decisions on Site C and LNG, and passing into law the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And let's remember that John did all these things during one of the most challenging times faced by our province: a pandemic, the worst fire season, the heat dome seasons, and the opioid crisis. All of those challenges simply highlighted John's leadership style. He believed deeply in teamwork. He expected those around us to use our skills and expertise, and in turn, he held us accountable. John respected the many roles that made up our democracy, people at the center, with the government, opposition, members of the legislature, the civil service, staff teams, and yes, even journalists, all doing their part in a strong democracy. He would often bring in experts in their field to take the stage to offer advice, and he would listen and welcome ideas and opinions wherever they came from. He was passionate about his role, and he took his responsibilities seriously. But through it all, his sense of humor and his ability to have fun remained strong. I don't think there's a story that doesn't involve John's antics in one way or another. Everyone knew that John loved a good laugh and was a great storyteller. So as I wrap up, I thought I'd share just a few of those stories involving John. Things I had a front row seat to observe. Some insights into a few of John's endearing traits that he would sometimes use to his advantage. Number one trait, John would never pass up an opportunity to mention that he was Irish. In fact, more Irish than Ireland, I believe, after hearing him mention it every chance he had. Being Irish was John's explanation for everything he had ever done. Too emotional? I'm Irish. Too sensitive? I'm Irish. Went on a bit too long in the speech? Well, I'm Irish. Used unparliamentary language in the legislature? I'm Irish. I honestly had no idea until working with John that being Irish was so complex and covered so much ground. Just to show you the impact of this trait of John's, there was a day in the legislature that some of you may remember where John, yes, used the F-bomb. The next day I was out on my early morning walk, and I can't tell you the number of people who stopped me to say how great it was that John said what he said. They agreed with him. Could he please tell John to keep it up? Well, later that week, John received a gift in his office dropped off by a local constituent of a little bomb that they had crocheted with the letter F as the fuse coming out of the bomb. That was the impact of John being Irish. Trait number two, John loved to talk. And remember trait number one, that he was Irish. I can't tell you the number of events I attended where it was getting late and people were coming up to John's staff saying how they felt really badly for the Premier having to stay so late. They encouraged their staff to let him know that it was fine for the Premier to go home. In fact, it was the staff who needed the sympathy. because John was always ready to outlast the party. He could keep the conversation going no matter what. One of John's staff was on a car tour around the province with him, and after a few hours of travel, he decided to make a bet with the Premier that he couldn't keep quiet for even 5 minutes. Yes, his staff won that bet. Trait number 3, John loves sports. When you work with John, learning all you could about a wide range of sports was critical. I was so grateful that my grandson Charlie had a love of hockey trivia that he and John would compete at so I could at least have an in on the sports section. If you'd seen his office, you would have seen the memorabilia, and I'm sure that the walls in the legislature are just fine despite the lacrosse ball that was being tossed at them constantly while John was working through another one of the problems of the day. He'd find ways to incorporate sports into all his meetings, his speeches, his events, you name it. He'd even find a connection with sports with every dignitary who visited his office, whether their team had won a contest, whether there was a cup or a game he'd seen, or he'd seen something in the country. The only time I saw it backfire on him was the royal visit with the Prince and Princesses of Wales, Prince William and Kate. Now, you're not supposed to engage in conversation in the receiving line. And of course, we'd all been given these instructions. Keep the line moving, just a simple greeting, that was all you were supposed to do. But we all know John. And remembering those traits, I'm Irish and I love to talk, John started chatting with Prince William about cricket, saying that he had played cricket and mentioning a number of tournaments that he'd seen. Prince William nodded and in a perfect response, smiled and said to John, "Oh, cricket, that's my grandfather's sport." Trait number 4, and all the rest since I'm getting to the end of my time. As you've heard, John loves Star Trek and Star Wars, board games, soft ice cream, friends, fishing, chocolate chip cookies, soft, not crunchy, cherry pie, and most of all, Ellie and his family. And I've listed these traits not because they're secrets. In fact, all of British Columbia knows these things about John, but because all of these things illustrate for me so clearly John's biggest strength. He was always true to who he was. Whether John, the Premier of BC, John, our colleague, our leader, our friend, our boss, our neighbor, or MLA, John was always John. He truly was the Premier's Premier, people's Premier, and we're all better off because he shared himself with all of us. He will be so missed, and we're all so grateful to Ellie, Evan, Nate, Daisy, and Veronica for sharing John with all of us. Rest well, dear friend. You'll always be loved and remembered. Thank you for making our province a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Some friends go back a long way. Michael, Elarton, and John became friends, I think, in the 8th grade and shared many adventures, some of which can even be talked about. Michael.
Some, Keith, some. You know what? It's really lousy being the last speaker behind a line of amazing speakers. They talk about a lot of the things that you got in your speech. So as I was on my way up here, Evan, you changed the way I was going to open my speech. And Carol, I don't know how you follow these guys, but you had to. You guys were amazing. I was just going to keep these in my pocket until you brought yours out. I can't speak intelligently to my rocks because I've known John since we were 10. And I learned a long time ago how to tune them out. Now, I wasn't going to open this. Evan, you killed my whole opening. Just like your old man. So I keep these on my desk at home. That's a little Hershey Kiss he gave me. And this one, he held up to light and he talked about it for like 10 minutes. And as I said, I learned how to turn them out. Do you remember Charlie Brown's teacher? Wah, wah, wah. You remember that? Well, as he was explaining this rock, that's what I heard. John Horgan. John Horgan. Holy smoke. Anyway. Oh, by the way, he also picked his biggest crybaby friend to do this. So he's getting back at me for something, and I'm not quite sure what. But what I wanted to say before Evan interrupted me was I wanted to say John Horgan, the only post-middle-aged man that I'm aware of to use the words woke and lit in the same sentence. And let me sweeten the deal. He did so by wearing a pair of neon yellow Crocs. Now, to be fair, I don't know for sure he was wearing neon yellow Crocs. He could have been wearing his orange pair, his teal pair, or even his hot pink pair. And you had to know for formal occasions he had a black pair. And Evan, your mom tells me that you've shoddy the yellow ones, right? Nadine, you got a pair? Okay, well, way to keep your dad's sense of fashion alive, Ev. Now, for those who didn't get the woke lit quote, let me just quickly help you out. So during, as Premier Eby was saying, during the 2018 proportional representation debate, John wanted to illustrate to the youth vote how much hipper he was than Andrew Wilkinson. Just think about that for a minute. When you have to prove that you're more hip than Andrew Wilkinson. Now, don't laugh and don't cry, Kate, because I got a lot of stuff to do here. You're just gonna. So, and here it is. If you were woke, you'd know that pro rep is lit. There it is. Yeah, no, he actually said that. I can barely read it, and it kind of just like hot butter off a knife. It just came out of his mouth. It was unbelievable. 3-second comedy McNugget. Now I couldn't help myself. I couldn't. So I had to do a quick sort of YouTube search to see if this little word salad was still being served up somewhere online. And it was, sure enough, 3 seconds. 2,600 views, 11 comments. Just slightly shy of a Taylor Swift download. The best comment, wait for it, from Rat Guy 101, who simply said, "Dad, stop." Comedy gold. Thank you, JJ. Often John and I would text each other or talk right after he had either a debate with Andrew Wilkinson or just any other sort of event. And this one I had to call him. So I called him and he picked up. And I have to say this time it really felt like I was kicking a bunny. Because you could just tell that he thought he outcooled his opponent, right? And I had to say to him, I said, "You know that cool bomb that you just dropped, Johnny?" I said, "It was awesome." I said, "It kind of looked like," Andrew was sort of looking like this. I said, "It kind of looked like you were explaining quantum physics to a dog." So anyway, I'm going to move off of that now. Carol, your tribute was superb. And thank you for sharing your stories. They were fabulous. The state funeral bit, that's John at his best, at his driest. And thank you for doing such an amazing job of chronicling his career. It was fabulous. And thank you for being his mom sometimes and keeping him in his lane. Right? I know you did. Yeah, I know you did. Mrs. Horgan would have been really proud. She would have appreciated that. So, Now, believe it or not, though, Carol, there was one good thing that came out of the 2024 U.S. election. You're ready for this, aren't you, Mr. Prime Minister? I was like, oh, goody. There's got to be something. One good thing, that's it. Debate committee rules. Debate committee rules. You might be able to use it against Polyev at some point, because it turns out today that you and I are not permitted to fact-check each other, Carol. But I have to fact-check you on just one little thing. And that's that John's first political victory was not in 2005. It was actually 28 years earlier when he won his first general in 1977. And what makes this fact even more interesting is he narrowly defeated my now wife, then Pat Hallam, when they ran against each other as Reynolds Secondary School Student Council President. That's pretty weird. Now, Pat is not what you would call it a modern-day election denier, but she was never happy with the outcome. But that's okay, she forgave, she forgot. 6 years later, she hired John at the keg as a waiter. True. She hired him as a waiter, but not before she ceremoniously stuck him in the dish pit. So it turns out still waters do run deep, and if John ever taught me one thing, it was to never piss off my eventual wife. Truth is, every keg waiter has to do their time in the dish pit. I had to do my time, but I can't help but feeling there was just a tincture of that's what you get, Horgan, coming from Pat. Anyway, the stories we tell. Societies are built on the stories we tell, the stories we share with one another, which is to say we're all born destined to become storytellers. And I am absolutely honored that Johnny asked me to be one of his today. But quite honestly, as honored as I am, there's a bit of guilt that goes with that too, because he had such a deep network of friends, many who could stand here and share a library of tales. To all of you, I hope that my stories, in some way, they feel familiar, if not in context, at least in spirit. And the personal insights that I'll be sharing will place a lens in bringing all John's amazing attributes into focus. Now, if you're interested in doing a deeper dive into his background and his career, go to his Wikipedia page. I have never been to his Wikipedia page until Johnny asked me to do this. And I went there, and not one story I'm going to be talking about today appears there. John asked that I share the unvarnished version of him. A heckler. A heckler. Get up here, kid. Anyway, he likes me. He asked me to share the warts and all version, if you will, the stuff Wikipedia is not privy to. But the truth is, so much of one, the public John, feeds into the other, the private John, as everybody has said already. So before moving on, I should properly introduce myself so you can truly appreciate the depth of my relationship with John Horgan. My name is Michael Elarton, and I am one of John's friends. That's it. Like so many here and around the globe. I do, however, belong, along with 4 others, to a group that consider themselves John's life buddies. Those early friendships that no matter what cannot be undone. Within our life buddy group, and so there are no hard feelings, I'm going to go by age. Our town elder, Drew Finnerty, Keith Bridge, Dale McMillan, myself, Clayton Booth, and the baby buddy of our group, John Horgan. Reynolds Roadrunners, all. Oh, that was sad. Holy smoke. Oh, there's one Reynolds Roadrunner here. Okay. Man, oh man. Any one of these gentlemen could stand here and talk as I am today, and I feel them here with me now. And I include John in that group because his voice is the loudest in the room today. But what's new? As the 6 of us aimlessly wandered, over the years the buddy group strengthened, and when the wives came along, one thing is for sure, we started eating better. And I'm going to introduce them by name too. So Drew's wife, Shelley, Keith's Bridget, Dale's Rita, my election denier wife, Pat, Clay's Linda, and of course, what's your name again? Ellie, right. And so given the size of the room today, there's not a large percentage of you that know me, but those who do know my life philosophy, which is we own two things: our time, the time that we're given, and our relationships. So why do I share my life philosophy? Well, because he may have articulated it differently, but John shared the same, 100%. And he just made a significant investment in those two constructs, time and relationships. With whom and how he spent his time was very important to him. So those of you who happen to run into him on the street and he spent time speaking with you, or maybe changing your flat tire, right? Don't ever think he did it to curry political favor. He did it because he wanted to. He was just that curious. He was just that kind. He was, say it, yeah, or just John, right? He built and nurtured relationships like no other, always wanting to help, never seeking anything in return. But make no mistake, John would be sad if we didn't cry for him today, and he very much deserves our tears as much as he deserves our laughter. And nobody liked to laugh as much as Johnny. I met him at the age of 10, playing soccer and then lacrosse. We went to different elementary schools, and so we didn't really develop a deeper relationship until we were in high school. It is dry up here. So I've known him for 55 plus years, which means we've been through a lot together, through all those informative years. And within that, of course, a loss of a lot of loved ones, family, friends. We both lost our fathers at a young age. John was a toddler and I was a young teen. So I knew what that was like. I've had the honor of eulogizing a number of people, and fortunately for me, John was at many of them. My mother's, my sister Lynn's, our juvenile soccer coach Harold Holroyd, and he was sitting not 10 feet from me when I eulogized our good friend Lou Garraway. And John cried and laughed right on cue. And these eulogies, I always look for him. He just made me feel good. And I always feel his gaze, and he had that sort of gaze of encouragement, and you guys probably know that gaze, right? He would just look at you, and he was soothing, and it was supportive. I just loved him so much. And I can hear him now, and I can visualize his gaze, and I feel his support. In fact, he's sitting right between you and Nadel right now. He's looking up here. He's got his fingers crossed. That's why I'm going to take a run at him now. Over the time I've known John, I will say our boy has said some pretty stupid things, but few as seemingly as what he said to me on a WhatsApp not long ago when he was in Germany. And understand, I only chide my dear friend here so I can laud him at the same time. In his message from Germany, John was asking me that I eulogize him, and then he asked me if I would make him a real person. It made me laugh. And I fired back a note to him as if this isn't already baked in, right? As if there's a more real person on the planet. If there is, I have yet to meet him, or them, I should say, I'm sorry. And while I understood what he really meant, I'm not letting him off the hook. I have been bumbling my way through life, and while I haven't learned much, I have learned there are as few as real as John Horgan. He was truly John from Langfordshire, and I don't want to start a turf war, but we grew up in Saanich. Now, yes, sir. You know, you get one person to clap at the Reynolds Roadrunner, and everybody goes, "Yeah, we're Saanich." Anyway. Anyhow. So he was John from Langfordshire, and I love the fact that he's John from Langford. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it. And he has with his unparalleled love of family, Ellie, Evan, and his wife Veronica, Nate, and his wife Daisy. But you know what? It wasn't just the immediate family. The Booths, the Bridges, and the Finnertys kids essentially grew up together, becoming more like cousins than friends. John would drop by on his way home at the end of an exhausting day to visit his friends' children, not because he had to, because he wanted to, because he loved them like his own. John was the guy they all looked for, the one they all wanted to connect with, the one they gravitated toward. John to some of the kids, Uncle Johnny to others. I grabbed a short quote from, I think it might have been your notes, Drew. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It was either from Clay, Drew, or Keith. No matter, and this is the quote, he said, no matter the time or distance that separated us, our families were always able to reunite, picking up where they left off as if no time had passed. It is a wonderful, treasured bond that our families have developed over the years, thanks in large part to John's infectious enthusiasm. I just thought it was a really sweet quote. On top of this enthusiasm for family was his passion for people. And John had so many friends. And I can't count the times who people that don't know that I knew John would talk to me and say, oh yeah, he's a friend of mine, right? Which I absolutely love. I would never ever tell them that I was a friend of his too, mostly because I didn't want to admit it in public. But anyway. But John had a way of making everyone feel as though they could or should be their friend. And when you have a friend like John Horgan, as you already mentioned, you got to share the guy, right? And Ellie, Evan, and Nate would know better than anyone. And of course, I understand what he meant by make me a real person. He didn't want you walking out of here today only knowing the public John. He liked that John too, don't get me wrong, but he was asking me to share the real John with you, the private John, the just John that he saw as in himself. The problem is you can't easily extract one from the other. So I was going through this, I was going, I'm going to share stories, yes. And I thought, I want to give him something from me. And as you know, John was a lover of sports. I am not prone to sports analogies, but I wanted to take a swing at creating one for him. So fittingly, John chose the house of his beloved Shamrocks. This was really, I know, one of his favorite places, and thank you again to the Hartshorn family for making it available. And if this wasn't his official state funeral, he'd be here in his full Shamrock kit, right? His hat, his jersey with Horgan splashed across the back. Yet I struggled to find an appropriate lacrosse analogy. And other than him wandering around here like he was the Al Waxman of the Q Center, I came up empty. So for the purpose of today, we're in a hockey arena, if that's okay with you. No disrespect to his hometown team, it just works better. I thought an analogy related to the great one seems more than appropriate here. And the story I'm reminded of is a coach who once said that Wayne Gretzky, if you played on a line with Wayne Gretzky, a fire hydrant could score 50 goals in a season. Most, I would say, take this statement to talk about Wayne Gretzky's amazing skill. For me, it speaks more to his benevolence as a player. Eulogizing John Horgan is a little like this. Like playing alongside Wayne Gretzky. This is to say, John was as benevolent as they come, always knowing how to make the other guy look good. Like Gretzky, at times when he could have taken the shot, instead, John would just put the puck right on your stick, and all you had to do was hit an empty net. Writing John's eulogy was like playing on a line with Gretzky. All I had to do was sit at my computer, and John put the puck on my stick. I guess this makes me the fire hydrant in this scenario. And I have no problem being John Horgan's fire hydrant. Wait a minute. You know what? I wrote that and I never thought of that. You guys? Yeah, I'm woke and lit. Let me continue. I particularly like the juxtaposition of the two great ones, one being arguably the greatest hockey player to ever live, the other being arguably the greatest premier this country has ever produced. Don't walk all over my lines, okay, you guys? Anyway, yeah, John is as real as they come, there's no question. To me, he's also as great as they come. And you know what else? I think Wayne Gretzky would be really proud to be mentioned with John Horgan in the same analogy. Johnny's humor and his laugh is what I already miss the most. And I'd say his humor was a central tenet of our relationship. But sitting beneath all the laughter and the humor was a lot of love and respect. Now, I'm a more go for the laugh kind of guy. Just ask our wives. None of them like it, which is why I do it. But Johnny had a more dry wit, like bone dry wit. I love that. He was the best. I mean, his state funeral bit, right? To me, that's brilliant. That's the type of humor I like. I was just never good at it. So I went out and I found a buddy who was. One of John's better ones, he dropped by the house one day. He came by to talk to me about the Germany gig. And when he was there, he also came by to see all the trees. We had 6 trees come down on our property, too long of a story to share, but it was in a flood and a windstorm, and there's a lot of wood. And as you can imagine, guess what was on site? A wood chipper. So as John's walking out the back to look at the carnage, it was hilarious. I didn't even know he would see it, but he saw it and on his peripheral, I guess. As he's walking by, he kind of waves his hand toward the wood chipper and goes, I was wondering where I left that. And then on the way back out, he tells me to pull out my phone and start taking pictures of him filling it with gas. Which I did, and I wish I had them up here. It would have been great. So anyway, and then he starts spouting headlines. Horgan caught with wood chipper in South Oak Bay. Fleeing to Germany to escape prosecution. The guy could tease the humor out of any situation. And as long as he saw the humor, you could say almost anything you liked to him. Almost anything. And I used to absolutely love testing his limits. Case in point, for a while, my family had a real bad habit of dying at a young age. And Johnny knew that I didn't do well with people I love getting sick. So right now, you might be asking yourself, well, where's the humor in that? Well, to blunt the pain, I would use humor. And because I have lost a lot of very important people in my life to this same odious disease, I almost feel like I've earned the right. So when John called me in 2008 to tell me about his first bout with cancer, I couldn't help myself. The first words out of my mouth were in the form of a joke. And again, for me, laughing at disease is the best way to punch back. So when he told me it was bladder cancer, I said, seriously, JJ? Bladder cancer? I said, we need something more manly for you. I said, how about prostate? I said, what you have sounds like that honeymoon disease women get, and all they need to do is drink some cranberry juice to get better. Well, like I said, I just punched back at it. Well, John lost it, and he started laughing really hard. Like so hard, in fact, I don't know if you remember, El, but you were in the other room yelling, going, is Dad Michael? Michael, he's not allowed to laugh. John, you have to hang up now. So he hung up. So we were always a bit of a high wire act, to be sure, but our sense of humor has always worked together. We could find something funny in almost anything, but John was like that with so many people, not just me, right? And it makes me happy to know that while his life was far too short in time, it was excessively long in laughter. And then there was our politics. In university, at different schools, John and I each majored in political science. How about that? And while I was busy reading Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau and the nihilism of Nietzsche and trying to figure out the tug-of-war between Hegel and Kant and transcendental idealism and absolute idealism, no, I wasn't. I was just trying to figure out what these guys were talking about. All the while, my good buddy is taking the 400-level practical course on how to become a premier. A course I never saw listed in any university calendar. So, I don't know. When it comes to politics, jokingly, when we were back in, this is in high school, I used to say to him, everybody needs one communist friend, John, in your mind. This was just my way of saying that our politics didn't align until later in life. Now, I wasn't Michael P. Keaton right, I wasn't that far right, and John was nowhere near being a communist, but I loved calling him one. But as we matured, the ideological gap narrowed, and with my communications background, I got involved in his work life. enough for him to seek my opinion on what particular matters, and on the John brand, right up to his last days as our favorite premier. I would tell him ad nauseum, branding is about one thing, buddy, behavior. And I used to make him repeat it to me. And when the media got all over him, I'd tell him, let the people see the guy I know, the guy our Life Buddy group knows, the guy that Ellie, Evan, and Nate know. I said, you ever decide to consistently show them that guy, that's the ball game. No one will ever unseat you. But before he made the turn, my favorite headline is Hulk Horgan, a hero for BC, or our voters backing a time bomb? Pretty sure that question got answered. When John was considering retirement from government for the last time, he called me into his office to chat about the whys and the timing of his departure. At the same time, he wanted to discuss the dreaded museum issue. Whoa, now come on, when you eulogize, it can't be all unicorns and sunshine, right? Warts and all. He asked, warts and all. But you know what? Johnny could shank it just as well as the next guy. The difference being is, what does the next shot look like after the shank? And that's where John excelled. His handling of this particular issue spoke directly to who he was. And here, he made something good happen. Instead of political expedience, he acted responsibly. Yes, like a lot of politicians, he pinned the blame. Difference is, he pinned it on himself. In doing that, he spot-welded his legacy as that unique politician. He mic dropped all of us, right? And he left the door as the most popular BC premier to leave office. He was wicked smart and really good at what he did. My point? John Horgan answered the call. He breathed life into all of those who obligatorily step into a voting booth, cast our ballot, and then cross our fingers and hold our breath, and we hope and we wish for something good to happen. In John, people finally felt they could vote for the person, not the politician. Countless people have said to me, I have never voted NDP, not until John Horgan. And you know what? You're looking at one of them. As I said, it's not easy to parse the public from the private John, because it's truly the private John that actually brought people over. But to keep this fun, I wasn't in his office 2 seconds that day in May 2022, and he says to me, okay, museum. And I fired back at him, I said, okay, I was driving here, and the best thing I could come up with was, they overdosed your radiation. I said, sorry, JJ, that's all I got. And you know what he said? He goes, I hadn't thought of that, Michael. And dry come back, as he always does, right? I also said, or you could always throw someone on the bus that you don't want to succeed you. And he was like, My advice, like others, I'm sure, was just full-throated, my bad, and walk it all back. We talked more that day in May, and it was really, it's a time to turn the page conversation. And once he got it right, John's outward behavior was what made him a stellar politician, but it was his X factor that made him an outstanding human being. And I'll use a short personal story to illustrate what I mean. John and I would from time to time stop by my late sister Lynn's house for a coffee and a chat. John loved to chat. And Al, are you heckling me too now, Al? Besides the fact that he really liked my sister a lot, visiting Lynn for him was showing me that he understood what mattered to me, right? He knew how much I loved my sister, all three of my sisters, in fact. He also knew this particular sister was the one person who could literally take me down and wipe the floor with me, and he took a great deal of joy in that. It was like going to the movies for him. So there was this, but more than that, he had an innate ability, an ability that allowed him to sense and engage in what was important to people. What I'm saying is, what was important to me became important to him. And John did this with so many people. He did it with an entire province. To me, that was John's X factor. He was a superlative human being and a multifaceted human being. And he was so many what I like to call different Johns. You need to appreciate this is not an easy gig, eulogizing John Horgan. One of the more challenging aspects is the breadth of this man and the existence of all these different Johns. So I picked a couple to talk about. I'm going to start with University John, and I want to start here because if things don't fall into place, none of us are here today. Now, our boy was 3 feet smarter than me, but that ain't saying much. It's a low bar. And it's safe to say that he came out of high school, neither of us came out of high school, in fact, knocking it out of the park. And Ellie will tell you that. In fact, she tells a great story, and she shared it with me not long ago, and I didn't know the story. And Dale, our friend Dale, also shared it with me. And it was about how John applied to Trent. And due to his questionable grades, his application got thrown into the rejection pile. So, no chance there. So that's okay. Story gets better. Quickly a backstory. In 1978, John moved to Ocean Falls to make some money to go to school. And our buddy Dale was on his second gap year there. His dad worked in the pulp mill, got him a job. So John got a job in the pulp mill in Ocean Falls. And while there, he applied to Trent. And on the application it says where you reside. So he put in Ocean Falls. So here, the divine finger of fate, belonging to the Dean of Admission, Professor Tom Simons, it intervened. And because John applied from when he was living in Ocean Falls, Tom Simons found this geographically very intriguing. So he pulled John's application from the reject pile and ultimately stamped it accepted. Thought he'd give this kid from a small, obscure town a shot. From there, John had to step up and do the work, and he did. But you ask yourself now, what if Professor Simons didn't undertake this act of kindness? What if he wasn't intrigued? What if John applied from, I don't know, Langford? Sorry, Victoria. Well, there's a good chance we might not be here right now, and I bet he would have never met Ellie, right? So it was a really, Ocean Falls turned out to be a very sliding doors moment. That was one different John. Here's another one. Hey, Ellie, I'm going fishing with Mike and Lyle, John. 2 other buddies that he loved and loved to go fishing with. And then there was Star Trek, John. You guys are also, you guys love this whole, I never got into the Star Trek thing with John. I'm sorry. And don't get all up on me because of it. And I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. In grade 1, John met our eventual and mutual friend, Lori Hallier. And in grade 1, John was the King of Hearts to her Queen of Hearts in their rendition of Alice in Wonderland. Now, this might have been John's only foray into acting, but he used to bring it up so often I could have sworn that he won a Tony Award. And so it was good for all of us that he decided to go in another direction. And while Lori did pursue a career in acting, you can go to her Wikipedia page, I'm sure, as well. Long story short, later in her career, Lori got a special guest star appearance on Star Trek. Yeah. So fast forward a couple years ago, Lori hadn't seen John for a long time, so I took her into the ledge to meet with him so we'd have a coffee and a chat. And no matter how hard I tried to steer the direction away from Star Trek, I couldn't. And sure enough, Lori starts reciting her lines from that episode of Star Trek. Then forgetting her lines some 25 years later, fair enough. And then, that's okay, because then our loser premier starts filling them in. He starts backfilling these lines that Lori couldn't remember. And I was like, oh my God, this really is a thing. You know, more than just John has tried to explain to me the depth and the relevance of Star Trek and how each episode addresses some sort of cultural or societal issue. Here's what I knew about Star Trek. There's Captain Kirk, and he went from planet to planet to planet to planet. And on each planet, hot alien. That was it. That's the only cultural nuance I needed to know. Once the good captain was out, I was out. But quite honestly, and I never told him this, I always thought his Star Trek thing was just a little bit cool. And you know what else? It was right on brand, because it really fed into his realness. There was whatever you need, John. If you needed a happy 90th birthday video for a dear friend in the next 10 minutes, all the way from Germany, you had it. If you needed a reference letter to help your children gain admission into a post-secondary institution, you had it. If you needed one of your children to get married on the top of Mount Washington and someone to officiate, he was there. You name it, whatever you needed, John was there. And when he couldn't make whatever happen, he'd have whatever you need, Amber, step in. And as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I haven't forgotten. When my son Jackson was applying to UVic School of Business, whatever you need, Evan was there to fill in the gaps with respect to what to expect when attending and the do's and don'ts when applying. And that information guided us when my daughter Natalie applied 2 years later. It's in your DNA, Evan, sorry. And I gotta think it's also in yours, Nate. Get ready for it, boys. Then there was disc golf John. And you probably saw some photos that were up there, they're pretty cool. And this story is not about disc golf so much. And over time, John built a course out the back of their property, another heckler, and they called it Horgan Hills. And one day, John, Clay, and Keith were out wandering around, and as they were wandering, they came across 2 young men who recognized John and engaged them in a conversation. And it was about a 15 to 20-minute conversation. That's not unusual. So fast forward 8 months, Keith is at the dentist. He has a new hygienist. They chat to where Keith and she identified that they both like disc golf. And then she puts him in the chair, and that's where it starts. And of course, the hygienist, she applies the most important part of her course learning, which is one-way dialogue, right? And Keith is muted by the sound of suctioning and stainless steel in his mouth. And then she starts sharing the story of her husband running into Premier Horgan. She shared how this one conversation completely changed her husband. She said, since he's more respectful, he treats me better. She said this meeting, this encounter with John was profound. And as Keith is telling me this, my mind goes to the current situation that we face right now of a lot of disenfranchised young men who are truly struggling, surrounded and consumed by relentless, toxic social media. And as I'm listening to this, I just think to myself, we need more John Horgans out there doing this very thing. More post-middle-aged men taking time to engage these young men. I have a next-door neighbor who spends a lot of time helping these young men. We need more men like this. We need more John Horgans. So this disc golf story speaks to who John truly was. It's a great story, and it points to a greater need. And this is the part of John that needs to be paid forward and remain hereafter. Nothing to do with disc golf. I love this story. This is, there's fruit.
I'm starting to hear the orchestra.
Oh, Keith. Well, we can have this if you like, Keith, but I gotta tell you, you guys want me to keep talking more about Johnny? So there's frugal John, frugal, fiscally conservative John. John and I traveled to Disneyland when we were 18, and back then, that's what I figured. Yeah, I'm here for Johnny. John and I traveled to Disneyland when we were 18. Back then, the tickets were packaged differently. Now I think you walk in, it's like a general admission, and you can just roam the park. Back then we had a book of tickets, and it went from A to like F, and with A being the primo rides. So we get through all the A to E tickets, and now we're just left with all the F tickets. And I'm like, okay, let's go to the beach, let's go to a basketball game. And John's like, no way. I paid for those tickets, Michael. We're using them. We're just using them. And I thought maybe he was kind of kidding, but he wasn't. He had me going on every teacup, every merry-go-round, everything. You know, he had this goofy grin on his face. He's 6'2", his knees are tucked under his chin, and he's loving it. And his favorite ride was It's a Small World. Now, I'm not sure how many of you here have ever had a colonoscopy, but It's a Small World is a little like that, only worse. They squeeze you into a tiny boat, then you enter in what is like a big cylinder, and they push you out the other end, and they pipe in this horrible music. And he had me go on it with him twice. And we were down to our last ticket, and he wants to go on It's a Small World one more time. And I said to him, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said, I don't know what the penalty for capital murder in the state of California is, John, but if you make me go on that ride one more time, they're going to be reading about us in the paper tomorrow. So he got what he wanted, and standing here today, I have to tell you, I would go on that ride with him as many times as he liked. Now, I didn't know it then, but at 18, John was teaching me one thing. He was teaching me how to be a parent. And I couldn't see it then, but I now, as a post-middle-aged man, I do see it, which is he was beautiful. He was truly beautiful. So a lot gets left on the cutting room floor. Real good, right? Thanks, Keith. Real good.
No, I think if you can wrap it up.
Okay, I'll do my, okay. This is unfortunate. Okay, I'll just run to the end then. I want to get this one in because this is my different John. Very quickly. It was October 29th, 2021, and shortly after John was diagnosed with neck cancer, and he was in the hospital for surgery, he pinged me. I was surprised to see his name on my phone. I was keenly aware that he was in hospital that day. My immediate thought was, maybe his appointment had been changed. It turned out he was reaching out to me as he was actually being prepped for surgery. As I mentioned, I've had a lot of early loss in my life, and I didn't do well with people being ill. The long and short, John wanted to tell me that I didn't have to worry, that he was going to be okay. I didn't have to see him to know how frightened he was. In fact, it was the first time I actually had seen fear in him. It was beyond this level of fear, and it was really quite something because it was about John worrying about me, worrying about him. There he was facing another uncertainty, and he called to check in on me, to see how I was doing. I mean, who does that? Of all the conversations we've had, and since we were 10, this one is unquestionably the most meaningful to me and speaks to the heart of this man's measure, the measure of a true friend. I am by no means the only person who didn't get to say their goodbyes to John. And for me, I'm sorry, that's not the same for everyone. John unknowingly threw me a lifeline and gave me this opportunity to say goodbye. And I have so much more to say. But I will just jump to the very last bit, respecting you, Keith. Life is far from perfect. We don't always meet the moment. I didn't get back in time to say goodbye to my dear friend John. I was trapped in Australia on business. But he never ever sounded the alarm for me to come home. I know others met the same fate, not getting to say their last goodbye. And for those people, I feel your pain. But your pain pales next to Ellie's, Evan's, Nate's, Veronica's, and Daisy's. It's a pain that runs the gamut, that ebbs and flows, and sometimes begins with shock, sometimes fear, sometimes anger. But over time, it typically yields and giving way to the loss and peace. And one thing's for certain, if you haven't experienced it, it's a pain you can't conjure. So, not long after putting pen to paper, one thing immediately became clear. The challenge in eulogizing John Horgan isn't where to start, it's finding where to stop. To Evan, Ellie, and Nate, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak today, to help share with others the most important man in your collective lives, and how your most important man gave all of us a life lesson in humanity and humility, and how your most important man changed and elevated the way we see each other. Saying it's a privilege to eulogize my good friend doesn't come close. It doesn't come close to expressing how I feel. It's a gift. And given it's the holiday season, as his little drummer boys and little drummer girls, I hope you feel that what we did today is we played our best for him. To the remainder of all of you here today and watching around the globe, from here, we are responsible for keeping John alive by continuing to share our Just John stories. And this is all that is expected of us. And finally, to John, I close by stating the obvious. I haven't made you a real person today, my friend. You took care of this all by your authentic, humorous, beautiful, benevolent self. I'm but one of your storytellers. And all I had to do today was stand here, like the fire hydrant I am, and hit an empty net. Thank you for being my friend, JJ, for being a friend to so many of us. I love you. We all love you. Godspeed.
Thank you, Michael. Decades ago, John, Ellie, and the boys came to the United Church that I was serving with my wife. And I once asked John why he came. John ran through the usual answers. It's important to Ellie, it's good for the boys, etc. Then he began to talk about the importance of the social gospel movement to him. J.S. Woodworth, Tommy Douglas, and even Nellie McClung, among many others, spearheaded or were influenced by that movement in Canada. The social gospel movement arose across denominations during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a time of massive technological disruption where the gap between the rich and the poor was expanding exponentially. There were widespread ripples for education and health, housing and addiction, numerous issues. And the social gospel movement was an attempt to tell churches and others not to be selfie obsessed, but to look for the responsibility of one for all. Those values, blended with the experience of being raised in a single-parent family, shaped the core of John. That passion and call carry the scent of the sacred. The next two readings, one by Deborah Beban, and with a reading from Bruce Hutchinson, followed by James Alwyn with a reading from J.D. Woodsworth. Thank you.
Thank you. John Horgan loved rocks. An obvious testament to this fact stands at his home in Langford in the form of a magnificent rock wall that he built almost 25 years ago. It was, at the time, a bit of a slow spell for the NDP in British Columbia, long before your time, yes. And John found himself uncharacteristically idle. The wall was a labor of love, meticulously constructed as he ruminated on his future. In hindsight, it seems fair to surmise that John's ruminations were mostly about how he could best serve his community. John also loved to collect rocks. He was known to search for interesting specimens wherever he went. He gathered them, polished them, and he gave these little treasures to his friends. As a thank you, or just because he liked you. With that in mind, Ellie has asked me to share a reading by our late, great Bruce Hutchinson, celebrated Canadian author, and the preeminent political columnist of his time, with whom John had a cherished relationship. As a youngster, John used to chop wood for Mr. Hutchison, though I'm told that chopping never lasted very long, but the conversations that followed and the mentorship certainly did. Here is a passage from A Life in the Country, in which Mr. Hutchison contemplates the significance of his own stonework. Of necessity, I worked with stone too. Retaining walls were easy to build once I learned to mix cement and sand in the right proportions. But to find enough smooth rocks for a patio about 30 feet square, bring them out of the woods in a wheelbarrow, and lay them with the surface approximately level was a task for 2 summers. On bruised knees, my hands raw from sharp boulders, I wistfully imagined that long after most human remains had disappeared, some alien archaeologists might penetrate a new jungle, stumble on my stonework, and puzzle over it. Here, one of them would say, barbarian creatures probably sacrificed young virgins to bloodthirsty gods. Or glaciers and earthquakes had accidentally deposited the stones in a rough pattern. No, a second investigator argues, sentient beings, not quite human, but superior to most animals, lived here before civilized men poisoned the planet and almost destroyed their species. If such a future argument was improbable, my walls and patio, unlike newspaper columns that perished in a single day, would last for several generations. It is surprising what a man can do over 6 decades. Surprising also that he takes more enjoyment in his spare time hobby than in his trade. The outdoor man who uses his hands more than his brain feels a certain pity for the handless indoor intellectuals. But men and women who govern the nation or manage its industry seem to enjoy themselves. I did not envy their exercise of power and admired their sacrifice of higher enjoyment. Of course, John's sacrifice of higher enjoyment, rocks aside, had everything to do with his beautiful family. And we know, along with his rock wall, John Horgan's legacy of service and of love will last for generations. Thank you, David.
Thank you. James?
Thank you. I first met John Horgan at Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario in 1979. He gave me this. It's a scarf for the British Columbia Lions. Premier Mo, I'm a Saskatchewan Roughrider fan. I didn't know how appropriate this bit was going to be, but I think I should wear this, don't you? John was deeply influenced by the founders of the social democratic movement in Canada, and it's amazing to think now that he is such a proud part of that grand tradition. In honor of this line of succession, I want to do two passages for you. The first is an excerpt from Tommy Douglas's speech to the founding convention of the NDP in 1961, and then I want to follow that with a short blessing from J.S. Wordsworth. While the words I'm about to read belong to Douglas and Wordsworth, I think you'll hear John Horgan's voice. So first, Tommy Douglas. The first thing that has to be done is to create a spirit of unity. This is not the time to argue about left wing and right wing. This is the time to unite all our forces for the task before us, that of creating a society which will make the wealth potential of this country available to all. Leadership does not exist for accentuating or exploiting our differences, but rather in finding those areas of agreement within which we can work together for common objectives. We must learn to work together, each of us with a part to play, but always remembering that our individual contribution will only be valuable if it contributes to a more just and humane society for all the people of Canada. And now a blessing by J.S. Wordsworth. This prayer has been repeated at countless CCF and NDP dinners over the years, but today I really just want to use it as a benediction on the life of our friend John Horgan. And it goes like this. We're thankful for these and all the other good things of life. We recognize that they are a part of our common heritage and come to us through the efforts of our brothers and sisters the world over. What we desire for ourselves, we wish for all. To this end, may we take our share in the world's work and the world's struggles. Amen. Thank you very much. Love you
all. Thank you, James. Although it may disappoint some, I think I shall forego a 45-minute sermon. And just say simply that spirit shapes character. And we've heard a lot today about character, about respect, authenticity, humility, and courage, which are the rebar of a grand life. I also just want to underline that throughout the many stories we've heard, there's a sense of playfulness and laughter and joy, but underneath that, I think John carried a deep sense of hope, and that seems to be in short supply now. Not the cotton candy version of hope, but hope that carries the slivers of the cross, as we would say in the Christian tradition, a Notre Dame hope that can look at the ash and the soot of what once was and dare to imagine something more glorious. Christian services like this often end with a reference to the resurrection of Jesus. And at the very least, that simply points to the presence of a power that continually works to present opportunities to choose the path of life. So what else but hope and curiosity, I think, that John personified can sustain us as we try to go boldly into the next chapter of this, our life. What else can nurture us as we make the changes necessary to engage our addictions, to persist in the difficult path of truth and reconciliation, to help us live long and prosper under the hovering shadow of pandemics or the next technological revolution or the terrifying specter of climate disaster, the ghost of Christmas future. What else but hope allows us, in the words of Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the Starship Enterprise, to live now, make now the most precious time, for now will never come again. So we can live with sobriety, knowing what we face, but also with a sense of joy and curiosity, grieve our profound losses, and rise to love and to serve again. Let us pray. Our God, great Spirit, power beyond any name, we are grateful for the life of John Horgan, for his gifts of leadership generously shared with his city, this province, and this country. We give thanks. For his commitment to truth and reconciliation, economic justice, the betterment of the people of British Columbia and Canada. For his humor in all its quirkiness, the laughter always ready to erupt. For the many choices to live with authenticity, integrity, we give thanks. We ask, God, that you will receive our memories and our gratitude. But Holy One, we grieve, we do not pretend. While grateful for the major chords of John's life, we miss the great note, the grace notes, the Life of Brian references, the Star Trek quotes, the joy at a goal for the Shamrocks or the Canucks, the tread of the Doc Martens, the laughter, the small expressions of love and concern. And we grieve in particular the loss of what could have been as a leader, a friend, a brother, a father, a grandfather, and a spouse. Walk with us as we learn to carry the weight of our grief, accept our tears, our anger, our confusion, our sadness, our weariness, and our doubt. All of this and much more unsaid that we carry deep within our hearts and souls, we bring this to you. Our God, this is the season of hope, peace, joy, and love. We hear your command to make it so. Amen. In John's final days, family and visitors gathered around the bedside of John to bid him Godspeed by singing "God be with you till we meet again." Let us stand as we follow Al's lead.
God be with you till we meet again. By his counsels guide uphold you. With his sheep securely fold you. God be with you till we meet again. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet at Jesus' feet. Till we meet, till we meet. God be with you till we meet. Till we meet, till we meet, till God be with you. God be with you. God be with you till we meet again.
Thank you. Just if you remain standing for a few more moments. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose on earth, a time to be born and a time to die. Here in this last act, in sorrow but without fear, in love and appreciation, we commit John into God's care. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And as we return to our own areas of service, may this old Irish blessing be upon you. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and the rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Go with God, for God goes with you. Dr. Shirley Alphonse, elder from the Souk First Nation, and John's honorary elder will come to the lectern with her support to provide the water blessing.
Oh, he, oh, hey, wah, oh, he, wah, he, oh, hey, wah, oh, he, wah, he, oh, hey, wah, oh, he. Wah-hee, oh-hey, wah-hee, yetski-skook, asku, hama-hoo, hama, wah-hee.
Before I start, Ellie, Evan, 8. It really was my greatest honor in my life to be John's elder. Creator, Great Spirit, we thank you for this day, the day we all gather here to honor and respect a great man, a great friend, and one of the greatest and most loved, Premier John Horgan. We thank the Horgan family, wife Ellie, 2 sons, for sharing with us John. Creator, Great Spirit, we are thankful and grateful to John for his beautiful spirit of Irish Coulombe. Good mind, good heart. Welcome, Coulombe. Strong mind, strong heart, strong spirit. We thank John for leading our province of British Columbia. John walked the good road, the road of kindness, the road of care, the road of compassion, thoughtfulness, and respect, the road of generosity and humility, the road of courage and truth. Creator Great Spirit, we now ask the ancestors for their love and care for John, as we send our love and prayers also to his beloved family. We lift up our hands to John as we say, Heichla, with heartfelt, Heichla Sio.
Brothers and sisters, what our beloved Soljuan, our elder, and what she has with her has been given to her not only from our brother, brought to her water from many different countries, all come together. In our culture, the water is such a strong, strong part of us. The life that it brings, the strength that it carries. The church, the holy water that they use. Ours, we talk here and here, asking for that strength and asking for that water to bless each and every one of us and to lift up our spirits. And for our brother, wherever he went to, he always brought back water for our beloved sister. Not only our brother John, but all of our other brothers that would come back from traveling from different countries would bring water, all combined together. And this is what our sister has with her. She has this water, and she's going to be using it to share and bless each and every one, the family especially, and to help our brother on his trip, part of our cultural teachings, so that his trip is nice and clean on his way, on his journey. This much, beloved, we all want to share with each and every one of you. And while our sister is doing this, we have a song that we're going to be singing, and it is called our Remembrance Song. The song starts out slow tempo, but then the tempo changes, gets faster and faster. And as the song starts out, that slow tempo, as the hurt emotional feelings we all carry. But then as the tempo gets faster, we start to remember all of those good things, all of the good times. And at the end of the song, the tempo is even faster, and all we remember is all the beautiful times we got to spend with our beloved. So this song is for you, our beloved family, and for everyone that is here. And for all of our friends that are not here, Heichka Siem. Hajtska szél, hajtska.
Thank you. You may be seated. Just quickly, a thank you to everyone for being here with us today. Just a reminder that following this will be a short remembrance video of John. And we just ask you to stay in your seats for the departure of the family and the official party. And then you are free to sing along with the Monty Python gang.
Okay, I'm ready to go now.
I'm John Horgan, leader of BC's New Democrats. Greetings, everyone. Premier John Horgan here. Hello there. Premier John Horgan here. Premier John Horgan here. Sam, it's John Horgan calling. So now the Langford lad goes to the legislature, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
I often wondered how this lawn looks so good.
Really good. Really good. Ridiculously good.
How are you doing? Good to see you, Mr. Premier.
I'm Premier John Horgan.
You ready?
First, there was The Bachelor, then BC Poly Bachelor.
Hi, I'm John from Langford. I'm 58, and I'm an amateur stripper of furniture. Some people call me a geek because I love Star Wars, but I have diverse interests. I like Star Trek too. I, John Joseph Horgan,
swear that I will keep confidential.
Swear that I will keep confidential.
All matters dealt with.
All matters dealt with.
In the Executive Council.
In the Executive Council. Live long and prosper.
Get to know John Horgan, some rapid fire, 60 seconds. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Both. Yeah, started Star Trek, yesterday Star Wars. Hey Arthur, you want to hear a joke? What's a Jedi's favorite toy? A Yoda.
Here, R2-D2s around here somewhere.
This isn't the droid you're looking for. Okay, R2, let's get out of here. Let's go. Leia, the stormtroopers are on to us. I'm looking for a first officer, and I think Andrew could be my number one.
My BC Green family, I think they want me to go with John, but John's a bit angry.
On those times when we get heated, and I, on occasion, found myself, on occasion, do some history, man. Why don't you go in the bathroom and talk to yourself in there?
Boom.
It's a global pandemic, dude.
Boom. Boom. Roasted.
The honorable member from way the heck over there. Come on, man. I think Andrew and I have come a long way. We really hit it off at the rugby over the weekend. And what better foundation for a bromance than a little bit of scrumming in Langford?
Who are you?
I'm John Horgan. Who are you?
I am Nartwar, the human serviette.
Good to see you, Serviette, or can I call you the?
You mentioned this earlier, the lacrosse. You love the lacrosse.
You've done extraordinary things, and I've been a lacrosse fan for 1,000 years.
I grew up single mom. My dad died when I was a kid. He used to work the penalty box for the Shamrocks in the 50s, and so lacrosse was kind of part of the mystery about my dad, who I never knew. And so when I was first able to start running around, around. I didn't want to play hockey. I didn't want to play soccer. I wanted to play lacrosse. And so my mom found the money to get a stick, get some pads, and then I never looked back. I told the Shamrocks they've had 40 years to draft me and they still haven't done it.
What can you say about John and the lacrosse?
Well, that's me with a lot more hair. That's my best friend Lyle Gurney, and that's my big brother Brian, and we were coaching lacrosse at that time. I grew up playing lacrosse. It was a passion of mine. So it's a great game. It was a way for me to show a little bit of leadership and to mentor younger people, and I've been doing that sort of thing ever since. Premier John Horgan, this is Governor Jay Inslee from the great state of Washington.
A premier who was a line handler first class on the Coulombe.
That's right.
Right, with ships going from Port Angeles to Victoria.
Yeah.
We got a guy who knows how to play basketball.
Lucky ball, there we go.
You got this?
You couldn't ask for a better premier in our view.
And I saw Bruce Springsteen in Tacoma, so we've got a lot going on. This is Mr. Lusk. He was my grade 9 gym teacher. In grade 9, I thought I had better things to do with my time than go to school and pay attention. He told me otherwise. He taught me the value of teamwork, and he taught me how to do this.
Now that is you in action.
That's me. No, it's not in action. I'm standing still.
Now, quite a bit of like an ass-kicking vibe, isn't there? You've said in Maclean's you're quite an ass kicker.
I was, well, you're carrying a stick, and you're allowed to knock people over, so that's another part of lacrosse that separates it from other sports. But yeah, I gave as good as I got, and I consider myself someone who would protect the most vulnerable, and it's easier to do when you've got a stick in your hand.
You look right there really tough.
The power of salmon is in all of us. Oh, well, thanks.
How could these traits help with becoming Premier of BC?
I think you need to have a mix of kindness and toughness.
I'm a rugby guy, after all.
I know this is a difficult time, but it's important to be kind. There's no bad place in BC, just splendor as far as the eye can see, for all occasions, as it says on the logo. If you were woke, you'd know that Pro Rep is lit. Anyone who wants to look at my telephone is happy to come to my office and look anytime they want to. I don't know if you want to zoom in on that. That's my telephone screen. You'll see from that I play Scrabble. I have Spotify. I check my heart rate. I know what the weather's going to be like in Prince Rupert. And I have email. I have text messages. And I have a telephone and a host of other things that I don't even know what they are. The Twitter Dome and the Insta stuff.
How would you describe yourself in high school?
Troubled in the start, school president at the end.
The leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Now, as a leader in a political movement, I want to make sure that I'm helping people realize their full potential because so many people helped me. My dad died when I was a baby, and my mom was left to raise me and my older sister and my 2 older brothers. She was sacrificing so that I would get ahead, and without her help and her commitment, I wouldn't be where I am today. My mom, Alice, taught me at a very early age that the best you can do is all you can do. Do your level best, son, and everyone will be fine. And I have tried over 18 years in this place as an MLA, 30 years working here, 63 years drawing breath to try and make it better every day for the people around me. It's Elections Day. I want everybody to get out and vote. Thanks a lot. Oh, now we keep chatting. Now we can relax.
John has also been a model in my personal life. It might sound funny, but also relationship stuff. When Kaylee and I are having a tough time, and any couple, you have these moments, we ask ourselves, what would John and Andrew Weaver have done?
When we first met, I didn't really like you. We were disagreeing on almost everything. I was fighting for the same voters you were. And then I thought, hey, the election's over. I really, really need you. So my thinking is, we could form a government.
There's no choice, John. I give you the final rose.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
No, you're the dominant in this handshake. You're on top now.
Sorry, man. We should have worked that out.
Hello, geoscientists of BC. Now I'm going to stop, do something else.
One of my favorite childhood books, Dr. Seuss, Yertle the Turtle. On the faraway island of Salamasond, Yertle the Turtle was king of the ponds. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Here we go. Here we go. This is for my wife, Ellie. Ellie, it's not my circus, not my monkeys. We had a bet that I'd get through 5 minutes, but I didn't even get an introduction done. Next week, Ellie and I will be married for 468 months. And 9 years ago, on our anniversary, I was in this place. And it was the introduction of early morning question periods. 30 years ago today, Canada was playing Sweden for the bronze medal in the Sarajevo Winter Olympics. You're probably saying to yourself, why would you remember that, member for one? If you go, well, I remember it because it was my wedding night. And, I remember it because I was watching the game with the love of my life, my alpha and my omega, my reason for being, Ellie Horgan. Now, Ellie's joining us here in the gallery today to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary because nothing really says I love you like an early morning question period. So, I think you were premature on that clapping because now I want to ask the House to please join me in saying I love you to my beautiful and wonderful spouse, Ellie Horgan. And today, that great Yertle, that marvelous he, is the king of the mud. That's all he can see. And the turtles, of course, all the turtles are free, as turtles, and maybe all creatures should be. I oftentimes pinch myself. How did I get so lucky? 63 years on the planet. I met Ellie the first day at university, and we've been smitten with each other ever since. I got the good fortune of being elected here. I've been able to move from that seat in the corner to this seat right here, and then over there, and then back here, just like that. I'm a lucky, lucky guy. I'm a lucky, lucky guy. Live long and prosper, people. This has been the thrill of my life to be the Premier of British Columbia. And it's with a great deal of pride that I say to those who are watching today, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, British Columbia.
Well, thanks so much, John. Keep on rocking in a free world and do-do-do-do. Do-do.
I'm looking forward to just being me again, talking to people not as Premier of British Columbia, but just John, a guy who stopped by to make friends.